Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Wu from Mask Network. Welcome to our ETHShanghai Singapore panel. As a tradition, every year we invite inspiring thought leaders to share insights of our industry. This year, we are very honored to have Mr. Jim Rogers here to share his insights and a few words with us. Many of you guys know him by his Chinese name, 吉姆·罗杰斯 because of his Chinese book, 牛市在中国，在世界上最大的市场投资有利可图 A bull in China investing profitably in the world's greatest market. So we're gonna expect lots of takeaways from Mr. Rogers. First of all, we'd like to let him to share a few words to the audiences. Mr. Rogers, please.
A few words. I am delighted to be here. I am flattered to be here. I am a huge fan of China, as some of you know. I first went to China in 1984. Most of you were not born when I first went to China. And I will tell you, in 1984, I was terrified when I went to China because American propaganda all my life had said that the Chinese are evil, vicious, bloodthirsty, dangerous people. So I thought I was going to be shot when I landed in Beijing. But it didn't take me long to find out that the propaganda, as usual, was wrong. The Chinese were not evil, bloodthirsty, dangerous people. They were hardworking, ambitious, educated, cultured, with a very, very, very long history, much longer than America, for instance, much longer than most people. And as I traveled around China in the 80s, I came to realize that China was on the rise again, and that China was going to be the most important country in the 21st century. So when I went back to America, I was on TV or whatever, and I would say, China, China, China. And they would all say, no, 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 Japan, Japan, Japan. As some of you may remember or may know, in the 1980s, Japan was the hot, hot country. Everybody wanted to invest in Japan. Everybody wanted to be Japanese because Japanese supposedly was on the rise. But my view from experience, from driving around China, was that China was on the rise again. China, the more I learned, the more I realized that China is the only country in world history that's been great 3 or 4 times. Rome was great once, Egypt was great once, Britain was great once, but China has been on top 3 or 4 times in world history, maybe more in world history. And I realized that China was on the rise again and would be on top again in the 21st century. So I became more and more interested in China. I've been to China many, many times. Some of you know I have driven around China a few times on my motorcycle and in a car. My children, we moved to Singapore so that my children would speak Mandarin, would speak Chinese, and it's had a big influence on me since 1984. I didn't get shot in 1984, but I've been back to China many, many, many times. If my children were here, they would speak Mandarin to you, but they're teenagers, and teenagers don't listen to their father, as you know, especially teenage girls. So, but we are still keen. I am still very interested in what's happening in China. I have investments in China. I'm sure I will continue to invest in China for a long time because, as I said, China is going to be the most important country in the world again, not this week, but will certainly be in this century. And as that happens, all of you are in the right place at the right time. Just be sure to teach your children Chinese. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can now quickly enter the discussion led by our own young and dedicated Web3 builder, Suji Yan, founder and CEO of Mask Network, to discuss about the rise of Web3 narratives in Asia. Please, Suji. And also kind of reminder to silence your phone. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm the founder of Math Network, Suji, and it's an honor to invite you, Mr. Rogers. So
I'm flattered. Thank you.
You mentioned your first trip in China as 1984, right? And I believe you started doing investment for over 50 years, right? What's the initial spark that leads you to say, hey, I want to do investments. I want to use these financial tools as a way to recognize the world. And what's your thoughts to the young people who are wandering in this new world?
Well, when I was at university, I was like many other university students. I had no clue about what I wanted to do or who I was. I thought I was going to go to medical school and law school and business school. I mean, I was confused like many other students. But then summer after I graduated, that spring, I had met a guy who worked on Wall Street, and I liked him, and he liked me. I knew nothing about Wall Street. I knew it was in New York. I knew something bad had happened in 1929, but that's all I knew. I didn't know there was a difference in stocks and bonds. But I went to Wall Street for this summer job only because I liked the guy. And I fell in love with investing at Wall Street. And I didn't know, I couldn't verbalize it at the time, but now I realize because it fulfilled my passion, and I had a passion, which I wasn't aware of, to know what was going on in the world and be aware of things happening everywhere. And here was a place that they would pay me to do that, pay me to know about the world and everything that was happening and everything that was changing. And then if I did it right, they would pay me a lot of money. So I didn't go to law school. I didn't go to medical school. I didn't go to business school. I didn't do any of that. As soon as I could, I went to Wall Street, got a job, and worked on Wall Street and loved every minute of it. They closed the stock market on weekends, which I didn't like because that was so much fun and so exciting to me that I wanted to do it 24 hours a day. So it was pure accident in my part, but it did meet and fulfill one of my passions, which was knowing the world. And so I would urge all of you, please figure out your passion, whatever it is, and pursue it. Don't do what your parents say or your friends say or your teachers say. Figure out your own passion and pursue it.
That's great, because I drop out, so I don't really have the face. I directly enter the new world without years in college.
Well, he's a free spirit, apparently, so he's figured out his passion. I hope all of you will too.
Thank you. And the next question will be like, over the last 5 decades, I mean, when Mr. Rogers, when he started in Wall Street, there was no internet. There was TV, radio, there's the original automatic clearing system. And now people trading on their phone, right? People investing not only stock, bonds, but something we can never understand. People investing collectible pictures of the frogs. And it's changed a lot. But I'm wondering, like, in your mind, what is not changing? What is never changing in the financial world?
Greed. Human beings don't change. Human beings can really do some dumb things. Human beings can do some smart things. They're more likely to do dumb things. But we all have the same passions that people had 500 years ago, 100 years ago. We do foolish things. We act on emotion rather than long thought out understanding. And this is especially true of investors. Very few investors are successful investors, and it's partly because most investors want fast money. Most people want to be rich quickly. I want to be rich quickly too. Don't think I'm different. Listen, I want to be rich this afternoon. Everybody wants that. But it is a shortcoming, and if you act on hot tips, and everybody wants a hot tip, and before you ask me for a hot tip, I'm not going to give you a hot tip, because I know that hot tips can be extremely dangerous for investors. We all want them, but if you act on hot tips, you're not going to be successful. You're probably going to be very unsuccessful. So if you want to be successful, try to differentiate yourself from other investors, and act only on what you yourself know a lot about. Do not listen to hot tips, and then you will be a very successful investor, and you will have a lot of money, and you will probably have a good life. But the main mistake that human beings make, not just in the investment world, marriage, whatever it is, careers, people act emotionally rather than thinking things through, learning what they're doing, and sticking to what they know. It's not easy, and some of you will say it's boring. If you want to be successful, be boring.
Great. Seems like we cannot overcome greedy. We can learn to examine our own thoughts. So my next question will be, last year Bloomberg have a very short interview with you, and you mentioned that you don't really have any digital coins. You
don't have any what?
You don't have any cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But you have physical coins, gold coins, right, and silver coins. And you also mentioned your wife have maybe some crypto coins, digital coins. Okay.
Chinese silver.
Yeah, and that leads to the macro market today. The fear of the collapse of fiat currency, especially the US dollar. The Fed is keep printing, and seems like the coins, no matter it's gold coins, silver coins, or Bitcoins, are our last defender. What's your thoughts on this macro environment? Because it's been worse and worse in the last 15 years, right? Yeah.
Well, if you look at history, you will see that no currency has been the dominant currency in the world for more than 100, 150 years. Nothing has lasted forever for many reasons, which we don't need to get into, but the US dollar replaced the pound sterling. Pound sterling had been the single only, as recently as the 1920s, Britain was the #1 economy, country, etc., in the world. There was no #2, but 50 years later, Britain was bankrupt. Literally, IMF had to fly into London and bail out Britain, which only 50 years earlier. And when I say bankrupt, I mean bankrupt. They couldn't pay their bills. And this was a country that only 50 years earlier had been the dominant country in the world. So it's always been changing. Before Britain was somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. So nothing has ever lasted forever. I doubt if anything will ever last forever. The US has been on top for a long time, but the US is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. I don't particularly like saying that. I'm an American citizen and taxpayer, but America has gigantic debts, and the debts are going higher and higher every day, every week, every month. And it's not going to end, because in Washington, they don't think it's a problem. But I know from history that it is a problem, that the deeper in debt the US gets, that the deeper the problem is going to be. In my view, it's not a good time to be a young American. I don't have to pay for all this. I'm an old American, but I've got young teenage children. They're going to face, and they're American citizens. They're certainly going to face many problems in their lifetime, just as young British citizens did in the 1920s. In their lifetimes, things went to hell. That's going to happen to the US, whether we like it or not. It's a very simple story. I'm not predicting anything. I'm just telling you, read some history, and you'll see how the world works. So the future of the US dollar is not great. Washington keeps printing them as fast as they can. Eventually, America's going to run out of trees. They print money so fast. And when that happens, the world's going to move to something else. I don't know what at the moment. And if any of you know, please don't say it out loud. Come give me a note later, because I'm looking for what's going to be the next competitor to the US dollar. In theory, it should be the renminbi, but the renminbi is still a blocked currency. I mean, you cannot just buy and sell renminbi like you can euros or dollars or something. I wish that Beijing would, I mean, they've been moving in the right direction for 15 years, 20 years now, but it's still not a completely convertible currency. You cannot be the world's dominant currency if you're not convertible. They're moving that way, but until it's convertible, the renminbi cannot be the major competitor to the US dollar. And I don't see anything else that will be, but I do know that something will compete with and eventually replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, as the world's international medium of exchange. I am of the view that it's not going to be cryptocurrency. Many people I know, not me, I have never bought nor sold short any cryptocurrencies, but many people I know trade them all the time and have made a lot of money. I also know that many cryptocurrencies have disappeared and gone to zero. So it's not a one-way street. If you think it's a one-way street, you're going to be in trouble. But I don't see cryptocurrency ever becoming real money. Yes, all money will be on the computer eventually. We will all have computer money eventually. Already in China, I mean, you can't take a taxi with money. You have to have your computer money. Or, you know, China's way ahead of the rest of the world, but everybody's working on computer money. Let's call it computer money, including the US. But the US and other countries, when they finally make all money on the computer, the US is not going to say, okay, this is money now. But if you want to use that money over there, you can. That's not the way bureaucrats in Washington think. That's not the way they act. It's not, they don't want to lose control. They want to keep the monopoly. So we will all have money on our computers eventually, but it's probably going to be government money. It's not going to be other people's money, except that crypto money can be around for hundreds of years as trading vehicles, but most governments will not give up control or monopoly. Even China, especially China, especially China. China's been around long enough to know.
Yeah, that's really that's really important facts that you witnessed the collapse of the previous pounds, right? And you and your partner they even involved in the collapse of several currencies, and we may witness.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second. My partner, I presume you mean my ex-partner. I have not seen my ex-partner in 43 years. So you might as well talk about my first wife, where I went to university or something, but I have not, has not been a part of my life for decades. But go ahead.
Yes, but that's very interesting that the government are the mighty monsters. They seems invincible. That one day, as you say, that even the Great British Empire have need to ask for bailout from IMF, right? And that thing might come to the US one day.
Not might, it will come.
It will
to the
come.
US
Okay.
someday.
Hope we can witness that in very soon. My question will be like, when the first time you travel to China, mainland China, that time there will be nearly no stock trading. There's nearly no equity or bond investment. Anyone dare to do these are some kind of in the gray area. But Hong Kong was a financial hub, right, for over 100 years. Now no matter it's cryptocurrency, ETF or whatever, seems it's the same pattern again. Like in mainland, it's a gray area, but somehow people are gathering here, Singapore, or Chinese here, like Hong Kong. They don't even speak Taiwanese. They use Mandarin, and they're doing the same thing. Do you think it's gonna repeat the same pattern that to use the modern vehicle, to use advanced technology and copy the model in Hong Kong and do that in mainland? Or do you think it's going to be very hard, that the Chinese stock story already lost its track for geopolitics reasons?
Well, the world, I'll start by saying the world has always changed and it always will. In 1850, in America, Baltimore was the third largest and the most important city. Most of you have never heard of Baltimore. It's still there. It's in the top 25 in size of the United States cities, but most of you have never heard of Baltimore. But in 1850, it was the third largest city and extremely important in many ways. It was a port, it was a trading center, etc. It's still there, but it's not nearly as important as it was. That has always happened. Hong Kong, before 1949, was not a very significant place. Yes, it was there as a British colony, but along came the communists in mainland China, and so Hong Kong, because China closed off, had to be successful. It was a British colony, so it became a successful financial center because there was nothing else. China was closed. So the world has always changed, and it will continue to change. I like Hong Kong a great deal. I love Hong Kong, in fact. Many people prefer Hong Kong, at least used to prefer Hong Kong to Singapore. Not now, for all the reasons you know about. But the main answer to your question is, whatever we think today is not going to be accurate in 15 years. Think of any year in history, 1900. Everything that people knew in 1900 was wrong 15 years later. Everything that people knew in 1915 was wrong 15 years later. You pick any year in history, it's a simple exercise, and you will see that everything that people knew for a fact and lived their lives accordingly was wrong 15 years later. So whatever we know today is going to be wrong in 2038. It's going to be wrong in 1938 too. It's going to be dead wrong in 2038. So don't make your plans without figuring out how the world is going to change, including China. China 15 years ago, that country doesn't exist anymore. China has changed so much. But that's true of China in any year in history, and it's true of every country. So whatever we all know now is going to be different. Even Hong Kong. The Hong Kong of 15 years ago no longer exists. It's not I don't know who's going to be the financial center of Asia, of the world. But before the Second World War, Shanghai was the most important financial center between Tokyo and New York, between London and New York, not Tokyo. Tokyo was not so important. But before the Second World War, New York, London, Shanghai, those were the major and financial centers of the world. Along came the Second World War and a few other things, and that changed the significance of Shanghai. But Beijing wants Shanghai to be important again, and it will be. China is going to be the most important country in the world in your lifetime. So Shanghai will be extremely important again, or Shenzhen, or somewhere. It's going to change. So everything we think about Hong Kong, as fun as it is not going to be true in a few years. It wasn't true 100 years ago. I doubt if it'll be true 100 years from now, just as Baltimore is no longer very significant. And I can give you other countries. Liverpool 100 years ago was an unbelievably prosperous and important city. Many of you, well, if you weren't for the Beatles, you probably wouldn't have heard of Liverpool, period. But everything changes, including Hong Kong.
Yeah, I was from Shanghai, so that's a nice word.
Have you ever been to Liverpool?
No.
See?
Yeah, but I've been in Baltimore, so.
Well, if you want to go to Liverpool, you can look up the Beatles. But even the Beatles are no longer in Liverpool.
Yes. Yes. So my last question, because we have another like 5 to 10 minutes, is you being legendary investors, you've been trading everything for a long time. So you know the regulator, you know especially the US regulator, the CFTC, SEC. So now especially the US regulator, SEC and CFTC, whatever is having a really, I'd say, interesting attitude to the new assets. No matter it's cryptocurrency, NFT, as you say, it can be their money. Has this thing happened in history, like in your time, a very hostile attitude to new asset class, but eventually they're proved wrong? And what happened in your time? What you think will happen in the near future?
Well, I will tell you again, you can read about what's happened before, because human beings don't change that much. But 100 years ago, people could use, you and I could use anything we wanted as money. We wanted to write a contract that I would pay you with 100 head of sheep, be a valid contract, and sheep could be money. Anything could be money. But then along came the 1930s, and the Bank of England, which was the most important bank in the world at that time, passed a law, an edict saying, if you can only use the pound sterling as money in the future, you cannot use anything else as money anymore. And if you do, it is an act of treason. Treason, important word, because treason means they execute you. You know, if you commit treason in any country in the world, they execute you. So the Bank of England, they wanted to make sure you listened and you obeyed them. They made it an act of treason to use anything except the pound sterling as money. Needless to say, people stopped using other things. So it has happened before. You ask if it's happened in my lifetime. I was not around in the 30s, but I've read about it. And I do know that most countries, most governments, I don't like this about governments, but the facts are that most governments have the guns. And if the government says X, you will do X. Most people will, because you don't want them to come around with their guns to knock on your door. So maybe, I know that the adherents of computer money, crypto money, say it's bad. I know all the arguments. Yes. I presume you do too. But I cannot conceive of most governments giving up the monopoly and the control. They love knowing everything you do. And if the money is on the computer in the future, which it will be, and governments love it, it's cheaper. They don't have to print it. They don't have to transport it. It's all right there on the computer, and they know everything you do. They will call you up one day and say, you've been drinking too much tea. Stop drinking so much tea this week. Because they will know. They will know everything you do, which they love. So I say, I hate it, but they love it. So we all have our views of what will happen in the future. But I have read enough to know that most governments love control and power and regulations, and they love knowing what you're going to do. So I hope you're right. I hope it's all going to disappear. I hope all the bureaucrats disappear. I hope all the politicians disappear. I hope we all can live our own free lives the way we want to. Good luck.
Thank you. So to the builders to the investors in Singapore and the builders in Hong Kong, let's wish us good luck, and we have all the freedom we want in our lifetime. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, even though the two have argued a bit about ex-partners, they actually have a lot in common. Mr. Rogers retired from the Wall Street at the age of 37, if I'm right? And then he rode on the motorcycle around the world between 1990 to 1992. He traveled throughout China and also 6 continents. In fact, that journey has covered over 100,000 miles and even entered the Guinness World Record. And here our Suji. He's 27, also young. He could retire this year, but he didn't. He chose to continue to build. That's why we're all sitting here. And so they both have the character, right? Young, adventurous. So Mr. Rogers had wrote books, and Suji is actually a freelance journalist, writing lots of articles and be a public speaker. So we have a lot to share, right? And keep building. Anyway, we have a quick surprise. So actually, we have brought this all the way from China. I hope you recognize. So this is a bottle of wine. Oh! Changyu. This is the first one that Ms. Rogers has invested in China. So I wonder if Ms. Rogers can quickly share anecdote. How did you discover Changyu? Why did you invest in Changyu, not Great Wall wine? Right, not Changcheng, but Changyu.
Well, what a shock. Yes, I own shares of Changyu, and the reason, in 1999, I was driving around the world with my now wife and then my fiance. And in those days in China, you couldn't drink the water, so you had to either drink beer or wine, because the water would kill you. So we ran into, in some places in the West, we would run into wine, and it was Changyu. Never heard of it before. So when I got to Shanghai, I went to the stock exchange to invest, and I started investing in Chinese shares. And I asked them if they knew this company, Changyu, and they said, oh, yes, listed. So it was listed on the exchange. So, of course, having drunk Changyu and known that it was a potable and reasonably good wine, I invested in the company. I learned that it was a company which had been founded decades before in Shandong province, and I was very keen. I have never been to the headquarters. They've invited me, and I do want to go. I want Eber to take me to the headquarters sometime. But that's how I found Changyu. That's how I invested. I still have the shares. I actually bought more a few years later. So I am keen on the wine and the shares. And that's how it all happened. It would happen because you couldn't drink the water in China. That's what 25 years ago. You had to drink the wine, you had to drink beer.
Thank you. So we can toast that, during lunch.
Correct.
And yeah, unfortunately, actually, we can. They don't sell it here in Singapore. So for the VCs here, there is some business, you could pick up.
Well, if you can't buy it in Singapore, I'll sell this. I'll sell it to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. So now we are open the floor to audiences here, so you can ask questions. One question at a time. Please say your name, who you are associated with, and keep your questions simple. And then we're gonna live streaming back to Shanghai and take some questions too. So we had about 20 minutes here. Yeah. Anyone from the audience? Don't be shy.
Well, Please don't be shy.
Yeah.
I assure you, I have made many mistakes in my life. So don't be afraid of making a mistake or sounding foolish, because I have made worse mistakes than any of you in my life.
Yeah, any questions, right? You can see Ms. Rogers can take anything. Okay, in the back.
Hi, Mr. Rogers. I'm B-Man from ABCD, and
From where?
ABCD Capital is a capital invest in cryptocurrency. And my question is, it seems like the Cold War is happening again, and China and the United States, it seems like they are fighting again. And what's your thought about the future of the world? Because the two biggest nations are fighting again, and it seems like the Cold War is happening. So what's your thought?
Well, unfortunately, if you read back, again, history will tell you anything you need to know, right or wrong. And throughout history, when you've had a dominant nation and a rise, you've always had a rising nation, somebody's been rising, and often they have clashed, which makes sense. Not always. Not always has it wound up in shooting war, but it often has, often wound up in a trade war, other kinds of war, and eventually shooting wars. Not always. I repeat quickly, it is not always wound up in shooting wars. But that is what happens with human beings. Somebody always wants to be better, and the people who have been on top are threatened by the people who rise, and it's happening again. As I said before, China has been on top a few times in history, and it is rising again. And it's the only country that's done that for whatever reason, but it's now happening again, and history shows they're going to clash somewhere along the line. How bad the clash is, I don't know yet, but history would indicate that we should all be worried. I am certainly worried about it. I don't think anything like that's going to happen this week, this year. Never does. It usually takes a long time for the animosity to rise a lot. But unfortunately, throughout history, or anywhere in the world, politicians love to blame the foreigners for the problems. Whenever a country has a problem, the first thing the politicians do is blame the foreigners. Foreigners have different language, different customs, different food, different clothes, different religion. So politicians always say, it's not our fault, it's those evil foreigners. That's the problem. And it always works. And they've always done it everywhere in the world. Mr. Trump started doing it, blaming his problems on the evil foreigners. He blamed everybody, Mexico, Germany, Canada, China, everybody he could think of. But that's the way the world works, and it always has. So as China becomes more successful, it will be a threat to somebody, and somebody will blame the problems on the evil Chinese, and that will lead to more animosity. It does not have to lead to war. It hasn't always led to war, but it frequently has, for all the reasons you can imagine. So I am sure that in my children's lifetime, my children are teenagers now, there will be even more animosity between the Chinese and the US. It doesn't have to lead to shooting war, as I said before, but it often has in the past. So be attentive, be careful. You're Chinese, so be careful. If you were Ecuadorian or something, you wouldn't have to worry so much. But Americans and Chinese are the two dominant nations in the world, and they will continue to be, and that usually means problems. The US is the largest debtor nation in world history. Countries that get into gigantic debt usually wind up with serious problems, often war, because they don't have any alternative. The politicians don't have alternatives. So be careful, be worried, be attentive. Teach your children Chinese.
Okay, I see a question there.
Hi, my name is Derek, and I am the CFO of Mask. So I work very closely with Suji, and because if we look at the title of today's talk, is about the rise of Asian Web3 narratives, right? And you have kindly shared your views on the Sino-US political tension just now in the last question. But here in Asia, it's not just about China, right? There's another superpower, India, that is also rising. But you've been advocating that China will be the most important nation, at least for this decade for sure. Just wanted to also hear your thoughts on, your view on why China is, going to be the most important nation within Asia, maybe compared to another superpower, let's say India. Thank you.
Well, I wish I knew why China is the only country in the world that's done it, but it's a fact. No other nation has done it. Maybe it's your grandmother's. I don't know what it is about China this is done more than once. China has also collapsed, totally collapsed, catastrophe several times in history, as you know. But for whatever reason, after being at the bottom for decades in some cases, China has turned around and risen to the top again. I wish I could figure that out. Maybe it's Changyu wine. Maybe that's what's caused it. But unfortunately, that's only been around a few decades. Maybe it's Mao Tai. I don't know. I hope not. But for some reason, China does it. If you can figure it out, you will be very, very rich. India has had some great successes, parts of India, not the whole. India as we know it now has never existed before on a world map until recent decades. But parts of India have been wildly successful before. Parts of Germany have been parts of Africa have been wildly successful at times in history. But China is the only nation that has done it recurringly. And I don't know why. If history is any indication, for the next few decades, China will continue to rise and become more successful, richer. But one thing about history along that line, China has rarely had international wars. If you look at Europe, they were always having international wars. They were always shooting each other. China's had internal wars. My God, the Chinese have slaughtered each other many times in history, but for whatever reason, the Chinese haven't had international wars. You haven't sailed off to fight Cuba or sailed off to fight Brazil or something. You were too busy slaughtering each other. I'm not saying this is good. I'm just saying this is a fact of life. So I would suspect that anything that happens as far as international conflict with China will certainly happen because the world has ships and planes now, and some countries like international conflict. China will be involved just because of who China is and is becoming. I hope that it would be wonderful if China said, go away, don't fight us, fight each other, leave us alone. I hope that Beijing could do that. I doubt if it can happen that way. So be worried. If you have children, you should be worried about them, because history shows that when you are the number one, somebody wants to take it away from you, and somebody will try to take it away from you, even if it's internally in China. But given the way the world is working, it's more likely to be somebody outside. As recently as 1980, you mentioned India. Well, India was much, much, much more successful than China. You know the rest of that story. I'm not as optimistic about India as the Indians are, and as some people are, because I can see what's happening in China. India has the world's worst bureaucracy. They learned bureaucracy from the English, and then they took it to a higher plane. So I'm not nearly as keen on India as some people. I'm much more keener on China. China basically has one language, one ethnic group, basically, not completely, as you know. But India has many languages, many religions, many ethnic groups, which usually leads to some kind of problems. So
Thank you so
I'm
much.
more optimistic about China than India.
We have, I think the builders in Shanghai will be very happy to hear this. And not for the hackers from India though. Okay, we can move to the next question, please, and keep your question short. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Rogers. My name is Jin from Moneta, Singapore.
From where?
Jin, G-I-N. From Moneta, capital, Singapore. One question is that in some of the recent interviews, I've heard about you speaking about this global recession, which is one of the worst in your lifetime you've seen. Can you tell us more about this phenomena? And if you have to pick one country in Southeast Asia, which country would you have confidence in terms of coming out of this global recession in a better shape than any of the other countries in this region? Thank you.
Well, we've had recessions throughout history every few years. At the moment, I'll use the US since it's the largest economy. It's been 13 years since the US has had a serious economic problem. That's the longest, by the way, in American history. That doesn't mean it can't go on for 50 years, but it never has lasted this long, much less longer. So historically, we're getting close. I can see all the problems which always happen before a recession: inflation, higher interest rates, overcapacity, I mean, you can back and read about previous recessions. It's all right there. Anybody can see it. And those things are starting to happen again. You have new people coming into the markets. Always after a long period of good times, new people suddenly say, I've discovered this new thing called the stock market. It's fun and it's easy and you can make money, easy money. It always happens, by the way. It happens at the end of every long period of prosperity, and it's happening again. So I can see that we're going to have more recessions, as we always have. I would suspect that the next recession is going to be the worst in my lifetime. And the reason I say that, for those of you who remember 2008, you know, it was a very wretched time because there was so much debt in the world. Well, since 2009, my God, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed. Even China has debt now. In 2009, China saved the world, helped save the world, because they didn't have much debt. And so they started spending money and helped save the world. But now even China has debt, not as much as the West, but has a lot of debt. So the next time has to be a very bad recession for all of us. And so I hope you're worried. Which country in Southeast Asia? Now that's a good question. I'm just thinking, I immediately think of Indonesia because it's the largest. I have never been a big fan of Indonesia, but I have noticed in recent months anyway, Indonesia seems to be changing for the better. I have investments in Indonesia. Indonesia seems to be starting to run itself the way you and I would run a country. But that's not enough to say. That's not the answer to your question. I don't have an answer to your question. Maybe, well, Cambodia is making changes, but Cambodia is a tiny country, and Cambodia has a lot going for it. It doesn't have gigantic debt problems like some countries because nobody would lend money to Cambodia. I mean, obviously, I live in Singapore, so I would expect Singapore to be okay, or I would leave. Don't have to live here. Singapore is well placed in the future.
It's okay. It's getting moodier and moodier.
Wait. She has the answer. You
I
answer
think
the
we need to
question.
drink wine pretty much after.
You answer the question.
Thank you so much. Actually, a tip. One of the favorite Chinese word of Mr. Rogers is Weiji. So unfortunately, we all hit on that mark right now. But I'm gonna drive this away because we are here to learn about building legend and right. So anyway, move to the next question.
Hi, Mr. Rogers. My name is Tim. I'm actually from a startup called ETHSign.
You're from where?
So I'm from a startup called ETHSign. So it's short for Ethereum signing, a DocuSign of Web3. And my question is actually, I apologize, it's actually with regard to Singapore and its role in the global economy and whether there are specific opportunities that you see for Singapore, such a small country, of course, but a strategic one. And this is in the context not of on the personal side. I've actually followed your words and footsteps to move my family from California to Singapore 20 years ago. So thank you for your words there. But more so from a Singapore Inc. perspective, is there something that the government or leading companies or global companies can do from Singapore that they can't do where there isn't this opportunity elsewhere, especially being neutral to China and the US?
Oh, well, Singapore is doing its best to be a friend of China and of the US. As you know, that's a very difficult thing to do in the long run, because whether we like it or not, eventually people usually have to take a side. But at the moment, Singapore is a very good place to be because it is friend of both. And as long as that continues and the world continues to exist, Singapore will be a good place to be. There have been small countries in the world that have done extremely well. Switzerland is a very successful country. It's tiny in relation to the rest of Europe, and Liechtenstein. There are countries that have done well at being small, and I would hope that Singapore, since I live here, I would hope that Singapore will continue to do well. But Lee Kuan Yew, you remember Lee Kuan Yew said that Singapore may not exist in 50 years, 45 or 40 years from now since he said it, because he understood what happens to places. He did say that if Singapore gets in trouble in those 50 years, I will come back from the grave and I will save Singapore. He hasn't come back yet. If he has, I haven't seen him. So I guess we're okay at the moment. But he was a wise person and he understood history, especially from his perspective. So he has said that we might have problems in the next 50 years, and we possibly will. Most countries do. So be prepared. Be careful and be prepared. I don't know how the world will end, but I do live in Singapore, and I don't plan to leave unless I have to, unless something happens. But this has been, Singapore has played it very well. It's multilingual, which is very wise, as we know. We certainly know now. And that is useful in the world in which we live. And Singapore is a free market, financial market and trade market, which is very useful, and it has been, it will continue to be. Singapore is getting richer, which is usually good. A potential problem is that Singapore has built up a lot of debt. Singapore's answer to that, I mean, if you look at the IMF, The IMF says that Singapore is one of the most indebted nations in the world. I presume the IMF is correct. It's simple arithmetic. Singapore's answer is, but we have a lot of assets. We have big debt, but we have big assets to offset it, and that's probably correct. A potential problem with that is that when bear markets come, assets can decline, but debt doesn't decline. Debt's still there. But at the moment, Singapore has built up big assets, which is good, and is a free market and is an open society, fairly open society, and fairly open market, which is, looking at history, that has been a useful, it's been a useful recipe for success. Singapore has more or less stayed neutral since its independence. That's one of the things that Switzerland did. Switzerland stayed neutral. Switzerland, by the way, became successful because during the French Revolution, all the French fled France and had to go somewhere, so they went across the border to Switzerland, and that's why Switzerland became a financial center, because all of these French were trying to get away from the French Revolution, and there was Switzerland. Don't think the Swiss grew up and they came from heaven or something. It came from the Swiss Revolution. Just as Hong Kong became so very successful because of the Chinese Revolution. People wanted to get out of China, so they fled to Hong Kong. So there's usually a reason for most things, and you figure out those things. Anyway, Singapore has been successful. I suspect that it will certainly be successful for a while, but nothing has lasted forever. Be careful.
Thank God. Otherwise, we're gonna hop on a motorcycle and travel the world. Okay, we have
Learn
last two
how to
questions.
drive a motorcycle.
Yeah, here and there. Two last questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, about your amazing panel. I'm Koei from IOTA Foundation. So I'm from crypto layer ones, but my question is not related to crypto. My question is like, it sounds like you think like the government will get more and more powers and bureaucracy according to history. Do you think like the technology can like solve this problem, or we'll just get less privacy and get more like supervision, because, like more surveillance? Because we can see like in China, there's great firewall. In the US, they are like snort and also like tons of the supervision from the US. So it seems like with technology and the history of the government, we will just get more and more like supervision, and we get less and less freedom. Or you think like technology can help to get us more, like we can somehow reverse the process? Thank you.
Well, technology will save us, and technology will destroy us. It always has, you know. Electricity, oh my gosh, electricity put a lot of people out of work. But we're not going to get rid of electricity, because it also gave a lot of people jobs, and it gave governments more power, while it gave us more power too. Unfortunately, I don't see any way that the world is going to avoid the problems brought by technology and the savior brought by technology. I mean, I have teenage children, like, oh, you can't believe what they know compared to what I know. If I have a problem on my phone, I ask my 15-year-old, because she knows much more about it than I do. But that is going to eventually lead to many, many, many more problems for the world, just as electricity did. You know what a machine gun is? A Gatling gun? People, 150 years ago, there was a guy named Nobel who made a fortune from gunpowder and bullets and machine guns. And he realized that war was horrible, but that his technology, his gunpowder, was extremely destructive. He thought it was so destructive that there would never be war again. Because how could anybody go to war with machine guns and bullets that could kill people so fast? You know the rest of the story. I mean, yes, machine guns killed a lot of people. Gunpowder killed a lot of people, made it efficient, very, very efficient and effective. But the Nobel Peace Prize did not save the world. And many, many, many people have used his technology to cause great destruction and war. So will technology save us? Yeah. Will technology destroy us? Yes. Somebody's going to be smart enough to figure out ways to kill a lot of people and destroy a lot of people with whatever the new technology is. No matter what you think, forget what you think, but no matter what I think, I know it's going to change us all for the worse and for the better. I mean, electricity is wonderful, but electricity has killed a lot of people. I helped other people kill a lot of people.
Okay, it's getting a little scary. That's why I see the audience from Shanghai in the black t-shirts. I think some of the one, they left because of talking about guns and stuff. Anyway, we wrap up with the last question here.
Hi, Mr. Rogers. My name is Fedaj. I'm a professor from Singapore Management University. My research has been around, one of the tops here is Web3, the other one is AI, because I want to hear you talk a little bit about what you think what AI bring to, in general, for example, this investment business, and how, as you know, for example, OpenAI Sam Altman was actually here a few weeks ago on SMU campus, and just from the crowd, you can see how excited people are about this new coming technology. So do you have anything to say on that? Yeah.
Well, AI is extremely exciting. I'm not a technology person, but I'm smart enough to know that AI technology is going to change everything we know about the world. It already is. It's already changing many companies, and it's going to change everything we know. Many banks will disappear because of AI, but technology has done that throughout history. I don't know a way to invest in AI. I would love to. That's only because I don't know enough. I would love to find a way to invest. I would love to find a small, smart AI company that has public shares. I don't know one, but AI is certainly going to be extremely exciting in your lifetime, in my lifetime, and it's going to change the world as we know it for the better and probably for the worse. Back to the previous question. I don't know how to invest in AI. If you know a way, please don't say it. Come up to me afterwards and hand me a note, because I would love to find a way, an efficient way to invest in AI, because it's going to change everything we know. It is changing everything we know.
We have about a few minutes before we wrap up the question. I wonder if there's any question from Shanghai through the live streaming, or everyone's too scared to ask.
Any
I'm
questions?
very curious. Okay, is there one, Lavender?
Any questions from the audience here?
Okay, I'm very curious. Actually, today we talk about lots of questions we cover sort of like geopolitical, right? And then about recession, about wage crisis. And then no one here is asking about what's your secret for investment? Because you are a legend. Can you answer to that?
First of all, I would hasten to tell you all, I am not a legend. I am a simple person who grew up in a very small town in the backwoods of nowhere and knew very little about investing. I learned, and sometimes I've got it right, but I assure you I have made many mistakes in my life. You want to hear about my first wife? Oh my God, what a mistake that was. What an unbelievable mistake that was. But fortunately, I learned from my mistake. But I knew nothing about investing. I want to repeat that because it's important. I knew absolutely nothing. I did not know there was a difference in stocks and bonds when I went to Wall Street. I just assumed it was all the same stuff. I learned, I became fascinated, and since I did become so fascinated, I learned a lot. And I certainly now know that if you're fascinated by something, you will probably learn a lot. I have 2 young daughters, and whatever they love, they learn about. If they don't like it, I invited them here. They don't care what their father does, but if they love something, they will do it and learn and grow. So that will be the case with you too. If you learn about something if you learn that you love investing, you will probably learn a lot about it, and then you will probably do well at it. But I want to tell you, please do not invest unless you know what you're doing. Please do not invest in things you do not understand. Every one of you knows a lot about something, whether it's cars, AI, whatever it is, fashion, whatever it is, you know a lot about it. If you want to be successful, stay with what you know. Invest in what you already know a lot about. You will be much more successful at it than I will, because you already know a lot about it. Every day when you go home, you read about whatever it is, because that's your passion. And that's where you will find successful investments. When you see something change for the better in what you already know about, then pursue it. Find a way to invest, do your research, do your homework, and you will become successful. Some of you will say it's boring. Be boring. Be boring with what you love. If you want to be successful, do not listen to hot tips. I want to say 100 times. Do not listen to hot tips, no matter where they come from. And if I give you a hot tip, God forbid I should, but if I give you a hot tip, please ignore it. Please, please ignore it and stay with what you know. If you want to be a successful investor, do not listen to me or anybody else. Stay with what you know. I hope that answers your question. I hope I can hit everybody here on the head and say, please stay away from hot tips.
We're actually here for Web3, and that's a subject a lot of people don't really know much. I guess we can just discuss over the lunch, or like Suji will keep building. And also another surprise, you don't hold any crypto, and so we're gonna change that today. Here,
it's a paper-based printed crypto, like the old-fashioned stock. I remember that when you were in the business, the stock was on the paper, right?
Wow, 500.
Yeah.
Wow.
How much is that, Suji, in the market?
I think it will worth a lot later. Okay. Thank you.
From today, Ms. Rogers is holding a Musk token.
Now you own digital coin and Dogecoin.
You can.
Okay.
Show that to your wife and children.
I can no longer say I do not own any crypto. I can now proudly say I own 5,000 crypto tokens, and I hope that I can say I'm very, very rich someday. Or I hope that my children can say that they're very, very rich. I'll give this to my wife, actually. She is a fan, or has been a fan. Hooray, Suji. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope I'm as rich as he is someday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we are wrapping up here. I wonder, because Suji has a tag, right? He's very proud of as a Web3 builder. So I wonder, any of here in the audience, we're gonna give the mic to Shanghai. They're gonna loop in the panel really soon, so we can basically cut the signal here. So I wonder, in the audience today here, lots of them are from crypto fund. So who would say yourself a real Web3 builder? Raise your hand. Okay, that's great, because you get the first opportunity taking photos with Ms. Rogers. We have about 10 minutes for photo shoot. Okay, anyway, yeah, can we take 10 minutes? They want to take some photos with you.
I will do whatever you want. I mean, I'm here because of you.
Yeah, California. Okay.
But he's from California.
Yes.
He doesn't count.
Great. Okay. Yeah, if you want to do like one-on-one, 10 minutes.
pleasure finally meeting you. And I really did move my family from California here because